Welcome to the Kansas Speedway in Kansas City, Kansas. Fall is in the air, and that means the NASCAR version of the playoff chase is well underway. 2 down, 8 to go. 29th race of this 2009 season here at the Kansas Speedway. See the wind, and it is really whipping here today. Gusts up to 30 miles per hour. And hi, everybody. Glad you're with us. Steve Burns, Larry McReynolds, and Jeff Hammond. We've got a 90-minute practice here. And as we said, guys, the clock is ticking. Larry, just 8 races remain in this 2009 season for all 43 teams, but especially the chasers.
I'm not going to dive back as hard as Mark Martin dived at me last week on Victory Lane when I said only 8 to go. He says, wait a minute, we're only 20% of the way through this chase. We still have a lot of races to go. But what I see, not to count anybody out because no one is even remotely eliminated, it looks like to me about like a 4 to 5 man race. And the reason I say that, when you look at those top 4 there, Mark Martin, Johnson, Montoya, and Busch, those 4 teams, they all have top 6 finishes in those first 2 chase races. Tony Stewart still searching a little bit as he was doing a lot leading up to the chase. Of course, Denny Hamlin really bobbled at Dover. So there's a lot of work to do with those drivers in yellow. Right now, if you held a gun to my head, I would say a 4-man race for this championship.
Now, Jeff Hammond, let's talk about this 1.5 mile Kansas Speedway. It is the flattest of the 1.5 mile racetracks we go to. We race here just once a year, and as we saw, picture worth 1,000 words, wind gusting up to 30 miles an hour today.
Well, you're talking about it right now, Steve. The fact that this thing's only got 15 degrees of banking. A lot of the 1.5 mile racetracks we go to, they're used to having 18 degrees. And when you're going this fast in this kind of condition, we talk about those gusts of wind. This racetrack, they're running the same tire that they ran here a year ago. It's lost some grip during the year since we've raced here last. So the combination of the track losing grip, the wind blowing, same tire, these competitors are going to have their hands full. And I can promise you right now, a lot of those crew chiefs are going to try to figure out what can you do to fight Mother Nature and the lack of grip at this racetrack. It's going to be a fun practice session for a lot of guys. But it's like always, Larry, what do? They figure it out, and somebody, the cream will rise to the top, just like probably this 42 car, which has been doing exactly that from this drop of this chase. I think he's been one of the most competitive, along with Kurt Busch, as far as the chase contenders that are not like a Mark Martin or a Jimmy Johnson with wins.
We've been racing here once a year since 2001. Jeff Gordon, the only driver to score multiple wins. He did that in the inaugural race and then backed it up again in 2002. But guys, since then, never had a repeat winner.
Well, and I think a lot has to do with just coming here once a year. And like Jeff pointed out, this track changes substantially from one year. When you're here in the Kansas area, they have very harsh summers, but they have very harsh winters, and that takes grip away from the racetrack. I think the racetrack is getting bumpier, and that throws a challenge to these guys. So I think that's one reason it's hard for one team to get their arm around this place and win back-to-back races.
Jeff, let's take this another step in terms of talking about the banking. Just 15 degrees of it. What becomes the premium then? What becomes your focus as a crew chief to help get these cars more grip?
I think you got to work on the mechanical part of it, Steve, because, I mean, pretty much aerodynamically wise, what you've got is what you've got. So you've got to go back to your bag of tricks, work with your shocks, work with the springs, and try to make the car get into the racetrack as much as you can mechanically, because the tire itself, we know it doesn't have any more grip than it did a year ago. So the crews themselves are going to have to figure out a way how to force that tire to get more grip to that racetrack, and that's going to be a really big challenge. And the other part of that equation, Steve, hopefully you got a race car driver that doesn't mind having a car that slides around a lot. If you've got a guy that doesn't have to, understands the car is going to slide a certain amount and he can deal with it and drive through it, well, it'd be easier to tune the car for him.
Well, I don't know what we've got going on. We've either got some people that's not very happy with their race cars, or we've got a lot of teams making practice qualifying runs because they are not running a lot of laps right out of the garage area to start this practice. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3 laps and right back to the garage.
I thought for a second that somebody had blown an engine or something, because all of a sudden, man, they went out and come right back in. As you see right now, you can see Mark Martin in behind there. He's talking to Alan Gustafson, his crew chief, and I don't think Mark is exactly happy with his race car, even though he's not on P1 right now. I mean, he's got some things going on with this race car. He wants him to work on it.
Ran 1 lap, so either that was a practice qualifying run, or he says, guys, it's fast, but I'm not sure I can drive it exactly the way it is right now.
Tony Stewart, one of 6 chase drivers of our 12 who won here at the Kansas Speedway, and reading his comments coming into this weekend, it sounds cliche, but you've heard athletes in other sports say it. Tony says, I approach this chase like I do any other race. I want to lead lap, I want to lead multiple laps, and I want to win the race, but I only do this one race at a time, one lap at a time.
And that's not a bad approach, Steve, but I think as Larry was pointing out, it's not that Tony's had a bad start to the chase. The other guys have just been phenomenal. I mean, when you got a guy like Mark Martin who runs a first and a second in the first 2 races of the chase, and you're back there just outside the top 10 and then running in the 10th position, you give up a lot of ground. That's the reason why he finds himself so far back in just 2 races. Now, can he turn it around? Sure he can. But he can't afford to keep giving up ground because, as you've already pointed out, he got 8 races to go, but we've only got 8 races to get it done in, too.
Looking at the numbers in the chase, New Hampshire and then Dover are top 4 in points. Kurt Busch is the only one not to have all top 5s. His worst finish, 6.
So, and I totally believe, I keep asking drivers, I keep asking crew chiefs. If you go back to last year, I've said it 100 times. Carl Edwards had 8 top 4 finishes in the chase last year. I think, and a lot of teams think, you may have to have 10, maybe 9 top 5s to win this championship.
There's Carl Edwards, famous for his bonsai move here 1 year ago. We'll be right back. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Kansas is brought to you by Toyota. For more Toyota racing information, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward. Glad you're with us here on Speed. Jeff Gordon heads to the garage, and on this blustery day in the heartland of America, Wendy Venturini and Bob Dillner hard at work down in the garage, and we start with Mr. Dillner.
Well, Steve, good to see you here at Kansas Speedway. Jeff Gordon's won more races at this track than anybody else. But right now, as you guys mentioned, everybody is battling the wind here at Kansas. Jeff Gordon coming in, he just made a mock qualifying run, and that's all they're going to do in this particular practice session. He said the car is extremely loose, and that is very interesting because as they sat on pit road and they let everybody else go out before they made their mock qualifying run, Steve Letarte and Jeff had an interesting conversation about that wind on pit road because Jeff was looking at the flags and he was very, very concerned with how it was going to affect him coming off of turn number 2. In fact, he thought he was going to be pushing in turn number 2 because of the fact that the wind was kind of blowing in on turn number 2. That's why he was so surprised. His car was very loose. They're going to put it up on jack stands to try to figure something out. Wendy Venturini?
Thanks, Bob. I'm laughing because the wind is terrible here in the garage area. It has been all week, but today especially the wind has really picked up this Friday morning, and it's much of the complaint that you're hearing out on the racetrack this morning, especially when it comes to the 2 car of Kurt Busch. He says there's wind blowing around in every direction. He can't really tell. He thinks it's coming from the grandstands, pushing towards the back straightaway. Crew Chief Pat Tryson right behind me. He said we get that watching the wind direction on top of the haulers, and the wind keeps changing direction so quickly it's hard to keep track of that. But right now Kurt Busch is a little loose in, loose off, tight in the apex of 1 and 2, and 3 and 4 is terribly bad. So of course that's the battle between all the cars in the garage area and out on the racetrack. Jeff?
Hey, Wendy, I was just going to ask you, would you like me to get Larry to send you a can of his hairspray down there? Because, honey, I know you're fighting the wind really bad, and his hair is perfect up here in the booth.
Yeah, I actually called Larry Mack for some hair tips this morning. He hasn't returned my phone call.
There's a reason.
He's working on his hair.
I have a case of hairspray. I'll only glad
Sounds
loan
good.
it to you because a case will last me about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years.
Guys, to elaborate on the wind a little bit, not only is it blowing hard out of the west-northwest, it's also gusting. And those wind gusts are violent. And you might say, okay, guys, look, it's a 3,400-pound race car, but it has an impact.
Yeah, I mean, you think about driving down the interstate at 55, 60 miles per hour and get a wind gust in your passenger car. It absolutely, you can feel it in your passenger car, so you know these guys can feel it at the speed they're running in, and it plays with everything. The handling of the race car, you'll even maybe come in and complain, especially if you've got a headwind down the back straightaway that the motor doesn't feel right. The motor doesn't feel like it's running. And you know what? There's almost nothing you can do about it, and you can't predict how you're going to hit it, when you're going to hit it.
Larry, you're talking about speed. Jimmy Johnson is the quickest early in, a 31.225 seconds. terms of miles per hour, that's 172.94. So imagine hauling it off down into the corners at over 180 miles an hour with all that turbulence from the wind.
As we're saying right now, these guys are getting their breath taken away from them by those gusts of wind, and the fact we've already pointed out, the racetrack itself. I mean, it's the way it is when it comes to racetracks. They lose grip. And like Larry pointed out, hot sun beat down on this racetrack. It gets cold. It's going to lose that desirable grip that everybody wants. And again, you can see where they've done and worked on the seams with some of the black tar that filled in some of the transition areas. Again, this is a very challenging racetrack to begin with, Steve. Now you've put Mother Nature in part of the equation, and it really just compounds, and makes the day much, much more difficult. Basically takes some of the fun out of it, doesn't it, Larry?
Because again, it's not like something you can control. It's not like there's maybe even, you can certainly work on your race car, but you can't control the wind.
Let me ask you this. How does the wind affect this practice? Meaning, we've talked about guys as we watch Sam Hornish making what we assume are qualifying runs, but will this wind dictate how many laps they do or do not run?
I think it's going to force a lot of these guys to work predominantly on qualifying, because the wind is supposed to dissipate over the course of the weekend. So it's not really going to be relative to the two practices tomorrow. The forecast is good. I don't think you have to worry about losing those practices tomorrow. And it's even going to be warmer and less windier on Sunday. But I do think these guys are going to have to deal with these wind conditions and these type of weather conditions later on this afternoon when they go to qualify.
Yeah, and Larry, I think the thing is, and you pointed it out, is if they feel confident that they're going to get their practices in for the race, work on your qualifying. Just get the car comfortable, like you say, to make that qualifying run. Let the wind and the weather kind of come to you later on tomorrow to be ready for Sunday. Because again, you don't want to wind up, getting yourself too far out of the box. Just focus on qualifying.
So a 90-minute practice here. They qualify at 4:40 Eastern. A look at your top 10 so far. Tonight on Speed, NASCAR celebrates race 3 of the chase in Kansas as Mark Martin and Jimmy Johnson stop by for our Friday night house party. Don't miss NASCAR trackside, 7 Eastern. NASCAR on Speed, be there. Looking forward to having Jimmy and Mark on. There you have it right now, and our buddy Elliott
Sadler will be there with us. So just looking at the scoring monitor, where our buddy's at right now.
24th,
and he's actually run a total of 5 laps. And Elliott is actually hosting 3 Army servicemen this weekend to a special VIP treatment. It's 3 guys that they're going to soon be redeployed back to the Middle East, and how Elliott met these guys was through chatting with them on the internet. So he's got them here all weekend before, unfortunately, they're sent back to the Middle East.
I read a release about that, and these are guys who have had 4 and 5 tours of duty.
Yeah, a lot of years with the military.
Yeah, they definitely have a passion for serving our country and protecting our interests over there in the Middle East. And I just really love the fact that Elliott stepped out there and said, come on, guys, I want you to be a part of this weekend. And he might be a part of our trackside.
Maybe.
I'm excited about that.
Hang out with us.
Yeah.
Ryan Newman has run 6 laps, and Bob Dillner right now, his quickest lap, good enough for 17th. What are they dealing with?
They're not really happy, Steve, right now with this race car. In fact, crew chief Tony Gibson and Ryan Newman were just talking about that. They're going to go down on the track bar a little bit, and they're going to actually take some wedge out of this thing because it was just a little too tight for Ryan Newman in his run. Now, Larry McReynolds, you pointed out the fact that most of these guys should be probably in mock qualifying runs right now. Well, Ryan Newman is not doing that, and I asked Tony Gibson why not with all the wind and so forth. He said, well, we kind of came here to Kansas with this game plan, and we're going to stick with it. Now, he did point out the fact that he may change over to that mock qualifying trim a little bit earlier because of the wind, but right now they are still in race runs.
And they're not too bad off to be in race runs. He's 17th quickest, and he's run a total of 6 laps in the Army car.
Chevrolet's leading the way here. Jimmy Johnson, Mark Martin, Martin Truex Jr., and Juan Pablo 4th overall. As we look at Brian Vickers, you see his best finish in 4 Kansas appearances is an 8th.
And I think this is going to be a good measuring stick for this 83 car. You know, they finished 11th at Loudon. They finished 18th at Dover. They come in here 151 points behind Mark Martin. But we know where the 83 car and Brian Vickers normally shines is the 1.5 mile, 2 mile racetracks, in particular a track like Kansas or next week at Auto Club Speedway. This will give us, I think, a better feel for how this team's really stacking up to the chase.
And Larry, you've already talked about it earlier. This is one of those teams they really need to. They've got to go out this weekend, figure out a way to put themselves between the 48 and the 5. No matter where it is, they've got to be able to finish in front of those two cars to try to, you know, close that gap and get some more points on the board.
See Jay Fry there to the left, runs that Red Bull Racing team, a long-time veteran in the sport, and Ryan Pemberton to the right. By the way, Joe Nemechek won here from the pole several years ago, 2004. Ryan Pemberton was the crew chief on that car.
Yes, he was.
Had a great weekend across the board. I know they talked to him in the NASCAR Live show just a few minutes ago. Now, Juan Pablo Montoya right now making his second run, his 4th quickest. This is another brand new race car for this team. That's 3 weeks in a row. They brought a brand new car. Talked to Brian Patty this morning. He said more than likely we're going to have a couple of more new cars to debut during this chase. And something he pointed out to me I didn't realize, they really, really want to sit on the pole. Think back a year ago, they were on the pole and their time was disallowed because of a right rear shock infraction.
And, you know, we had a conference call earlier this week, and you guys had a good point. We look at numbers and stats from previous races of drivers. Juan Pablo's numbers are irrelevant because he has exceeded this year everything that he's done in the previous 2 seasons.
No, you're right. I mean, he just seemed like all of a sudden they've got this deal figured out. Brian Patty came up with a great game plan, and you can throw away what he's done in the past and just really focus on what they're doing right now. There's Brian Patty, and I'm telling you, he may not be where he wants him to be, but I'm pretty impressed with another new car, their 4th quickest right off the truck. And Wendy, what are they saying about this car? Because they're looking pretty good on the racetrack.
Crew chief Brian Patty said that the lap times look pretty good. Now, Juan Pablo Montoya is dragging the splitter right now, so they do have to make an adjustment with the car when they come in the next time. He's 4th on the practice chart, but if you look at the top of the hauler, you see crew chief Brian Patty along with some other employees with Earnhardt Ganassi Racing, and you see Martin Truex's crew chief Bono, Kevin Mannion. He's up on this hauler. The reason he's up on this one instead of the one truck hauler on the other side of the garage area, there's limited view on that second row. The guys that are deeper in points have a hard time seeing across the racetrack from the top of those haulers, right around the Joey Logano Home Depot hauler area, Kevin Harvick's hauler. So a lot of the crew chiefs have come to this front row of haulers to get a better view, and that includes Bono, Kevin Bono Mannion.
You know, I was telling someone earlier this week, if I think people would pay really close attention, we looked at the points at the top of the show. When you look at our top 4 or 5, what great stories we have right there. We've got Jimmy Johnson, the 48 team, trying to rewrite the NASCAR record books. We've got a 50-year-old guy that's sitting there leading the points. We got a guy that's won in Formula One and the Indy 500 sitting 3rd in points. We got the inaugural Chase winner, Kurt Busch, from 2004 4th. And oh, by the way, in his first year as a driver owner, we've got Tony Stewart in the 14 team sitting 5th. That's as good as the stories can get right there.
There's Tony Stewart talking to his teammate, Ryan Newman. Jimmy Johnson's the quickest. We'll be right back. Let's take a look at our quality in track description of this Kansas Speedway. We told you it's 1.5 miles. The flattest of the 1.5 mile tracks. Practice continues here at the Kansas Speedway.
You know, Jeff talked about it at the top of the show, 15 degrees of banking in the corners. It's almost the law of physics takes over. The speed you're trying to go off in the corner, the track record here is over 180 miles an hour average. You'll see speeds in qualifying well over 200 miles an hour getting off in the corner. 15 degrees of banking is not a lot of banking to hold that type of speed.
We have 46 cars here. Qualify later this afternoon, 4:40 Eastern. The only driver not on the track is David Gilliland, who's driving a team car for Robbie Gordon Motorsports. Gilliland this week will be in the 04 car. Jeff Gordon out on the racetrack.
And Larry, just to add real quick, we're talking about David Gilliland. I seen your buddy Doug Richard from NASCAR Performance down there turning the wrenches on that bad boy.
Yep, that's second Robbie Gordon Motorsports car.
What time, Larry?
Well, you
What time
get two
is
airings.
NASCAR Performance?
You get two airings, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, Saturday evening.
Yes.
And again, as you were having your coffee, Steve, Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern.
Perfect.
Double
Perfect.
trouble.
Oh, I love
We're going to talk about front sway bars, anti-roll bars.
it. No Ackerman this week?
No Ackerman. I don't know. We
Kingpin.
got an Ackerman show lined up for the rest of 2009.
I have to read your book again.
There you go. The book constantly is changing, though.
Always changing.
Jeff Gordon right now, he winds up still being 7th as far as his practice session is concerned. But I guess more importantly is whether or not he and Steve Letard have got this car a little more comfortable.
But tell you what, they had a great comeback last week. They had a problem with an air wrench. He was running second at the time, but rallied to finish 6th. So Gordon 6th at Dover, 15th at New Hampshire, Bob.
Well, Greg Biffle is looking forward to this weekend because you look at his stats here, and he's always very good here at Kansas. In fact, in the last 5 races, he has 4 top 5 finishes, including that win 2 years ago. But right now, what Greg Biffle is doing is they came with the same exact package that they had here last year. He said it was pretty good. It bottomed out on the splitter just a little bit. But before they go over to mock qualifying trim, what they want to do here is they want to try something completely out of the box. So you see Greg Irwin right there. He is telling the crew what they want on this car. They're trying to get the height set just so. Greg's inside the car. One more race type run for him, and then he will move over to qualifying trim. But the interesting thing, Wendy, I asked Greg about the wind out there. He says, man, it feels like you're in a big old SUV on the highway and you get those gusts of wind because it blows the car all over the place.
Well, Bob, I'm sure Denny Hamlin wished his biggest concern was the wind, but it's not for Denny Hamlin in this practice session. He spent most of his time so far in the garage area, and that's because he had no brakes. They had to come in, change the rotors and the pads on that race car. You see him pulling out of the garage stall now. This is only the second run for Denny Hamlin. He is in race trim right now. He's only gotten 5 laps on that racetrack, 15th on the chart. So I know now that they fixed these brakes and he goes back out there, he should be able to get some better lap times. Guys?
Well, Wendy, Jimmy Johnson is the defending champion of this race. Led 124 laps, but I think, guys, what everybody remembers is the bonsai move that Carl Edwards makes in this 99 car on the last lap.
He was going for it. He said it worked on a video game one time.
Great quote from Jimmy Johnson, and that was the battle for the lead. Jimmy Johnson said, when he went underneath me, he said, I could hear he was still wide open. And I said, where the hell is he going?
And he almost pulled it
He
off.
almost pulled it off.
I tell you right now, can you, again, Larry, can you imagine the look on the driver's face? Like I said, when you see somebody shoot down on the inside right there, and you know, if I'm off the gas, he needs to be off
That's
the gas.
right,
He
he's
just
not.
passed me, and he's still digging. He must know something I don't know.
But, Jimmy, the end of his comment as we watched Carl head to the garage was, I really admired that move. He said Carl got some criticism. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, it's like Carl said, I didn't come here to finish second. You know, this is kind of a home track for Carl. Of course, he's from nearby Missouri, and our title sponsor, Sprint, they're doing a really cool deal with Carl Edwards and with Clint Boyer. It's called the State Line Challenge. Clint Boyer's from nearby Emporia, Kansas. We know we have the groundbreaking that just happened at the Victory Junction camp here, the second one that they're going to have here in Kansas. So what Sprint is doing is they've taken those 2 drivers, and whoever beats who on Sunday, doesn't matter where you finish as long as you outrun the other guy, in that driver's name, they're going to donate $100,000 to the Victory Junction camp, and then whoever finished second, they're going to get $25,000 donated in their name. So it's a win-win for everybody, especially the Victory Junction camp.
And, of course, Carl from Columbia, Missouri.
Yep.
Taking a look at David Rudiman in his Toyota for Michael Waltrip Racing. Rudiman right now 19th overall. 11 laps of practice for him as he heads down to the garage.
You know, they've had some good runs on the mile-and-a-half racetrack, so you better watch out for that 0-0.
Like Lowe's Motor Speedway.
Uh-huh.
We'll be right back to Kansas. 32 minutes into a 90-minute practice. You see how brisk the breeze is here. Temperatures expected to top out at 60 degrees here in Kansas City, Kansas. Well, going to break, we saw Tony Stewart in the garage hanging out with his dad. Let's find out what's going on in that camp with Wendy.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, on this windy day, I've heard every windy joke this morning, but right now Tony Stewart in the garage talking to his dad, waiting for the car to be switched over to qualifying trim. They started out in race trim. He's 28th on the practice chart, has run 6 laps, and he's just taking it easy while they make these slow changes. I asked him how the wind felt in that race car, and he says, oh, it's awfully gusty. He said the worst part is actually sitting on pit road waiting to go out. He said it feels like there's about 5 guys bouncing your car around on pit road as you wait to go out there, and then once you do get out there, it's awfully gusty, as Bob had told the story about an SUV going through the interstate. But right now, Tony Stewart's waiting to get it back out for that qualifying trim, and here's a question for you, Larry Mack. They go out first in the qualifying session later on today, so they wanted to switch over to qualifying trim as quickly as possible and get that out there. Is that a disadvantage for Tony going out so early, especially with what's at stake at these points?
I think the only advantage or disadvantage would be if the wind dies down, you know, and I don't anticipate that's going to happen. I think the time of day that these guys are going to go out, the Nationwide Series cars, they're going to be on the racetrack in between this practice and Cup qualifying, so I don't know that there's a huge advantage. I still, and I know Jeff Hammond feels the same way, I still always like a late draw, no matter what the scenario. But unless this wind dies down, I'm not sure there'll be an advantage or disadvantage.
Anything but number one. I don't ever like going out number one, but talking about and looking at Tony Stewart, probably even Jimmy Johnson, if you're his hero was who? A.J. Foyt. Guess where A.J. Foyt's going to be on Sunday night?
Wind tunnel.
That's right, with Dave Despain.
Robin Miller.
Oh, Robin Miller.
Miller's
going to be there in place of Dave.
I believe that's how that's going to work.
You know, that's going to be a real interesting combination, because I don't think that Robin will cut the AJ any slack.
Guess who I saw in wind tunnel last week?
Who?
Larry McReynolds.
I was at the very end of it.
I didn't see you. I heard
an update. You know, as we're looking at this 48 cars, he's finished a run, and right now he's still the quickest. I feel like for the sake of NASCAR, for the sake of Hendrick Motorsports, we need to clear a little something up, because I'm sure it's gonna go crazy. Last week after Dover, NASCAR, they always take the winning car back to the NASCAR R&D Center, and they take a random car, and it just happened to be the 5 car, 2 Hendrick cars. And what NASCAR found, the 2 cars were legal. They absolutely fit the rules. But what NASCAR found is that those 2 teams had pushed the envelope about as far as you could push it in a lot of areas. And what NASCAR wanted to point out to Hendrick Motorsports, it's particular to Chad Knaus and Alan Gustafson, they brought them over and said, look, your 2 cars are legal, but we're just telling you, you're pushing it mighty close. Don't cause yourself a problem in these chase races, because, you know, it's like cubic inches. We're allowed 355 cubic inches. You do not want to have an engine that's 354.9. It's flirting too close to the edge, and that's just what NASCAR was pointing out to these teams. The 2 cars were legal. That's the one thing I want to stress and make a point, but they were just very marginal and very close to the edge in some areas.
Well, let's go down into that garage and catch up with Bob.
Ryan Pemberton and Brian Vickers have been working diligently in trying to figure out this race car. You see Brian there, he's got his little computer notepad and he's making notes on that car. They're working on the balance, but they noted that it's really difficult with the way the wind is disturbing the car, so they are changing over to mock qualifying trim right now. They're going to make 2 or 3 runs during this practice session to get ready for qualifying a little bit later today at Kansas Speedway, but right now they don't quite have the balance on this 83 car. On the other hand, right next door is Carl Edwards, and the difference in philosophies here is interesting. Some guys started out in race trim, some guys started out in qualifying trim. You see Carl Edwards, he's inside that car right now. They're going to close the hood on that car. He has been in qualifying trim since the get-go, and they're trying to dial in because they know track position so crucial here at Kansas Speedway. That's why they want a good qualifying run later today, guys.
And that's something a lot of times the 99, they don't do on Friday. They normally stay in race trim for quite a while, and then maybe in the last 15 or 20 minutes flip over to qualifying trim. Here's his teammate Greg Biffle in the 16 car. Greg is 12th quickest. He's run a total of 8 laps, the most laps anybody's run by a long shot, and I saw him just out there on the racetrack. In fact, he's over in turn 4 right now, is actually Kyle Busch. He's coming to complete 24 laps in this practice session, so they're definitely working on race trim. Steve Addington and that group.
I would say, just quick glance, less than half or perhaps half the teams have run less than 10 laps.
And again, I think it has a lot to do with, you want to get a good starting position. You need to get up toward the front. And when we look at the Roush Fenway crew, we know they need to pick up their qualifying effort. I think that's one thing. Last week, Greg Biffle, they started 4th. We take a look here at Steve Addington, as well as you see the 18 of Kyle Busch coming back down pit road. But, Kyle's probably run more laps than anybody else so far. He's run 24 laps in his practice session, so we know what they're working on. But all this stuff combined right now, Steve, is everybody comes in with a different game plan. I think the 18's probably got a different game plan than what the 11 does, and I wouldn't be one bit surprised since they're outside the chase. They're working on race setup, so they allow the 11 car to work on qualifying.
Paul Menard, 14th overall right now. Guys, 5 of the 8 Kansas races have been won from a top 10 starting position, twice from the pole. But we talked about this some last week, and we've talked about it in the past. Qualifying the top 10, it helps also your pit selection. There's a lot of things that really spring off. And I know that Chad Canals has said many times, Larry, I'm sure on NASCAR Performance, my job is to provide a top 10 race car. That's their goal every week.
And when you look there's very few races in 2009 that the 48 car has qualified outside the top 10. You go back to last week at Dover, by sitting on the pole, he had that very last pit box leaving pit road, and that is such an advantage, especially when it comes to a caution flag pit stop, because you don't have to move that far to win the battle off pit road. Talking about Paul Menard, being up there as quick as he is right now, 15th. Remember, qualified 10th last week at Dover.
Kansas native Clint Boyer used to race dirt tracks here in the Sunflower State. Jeff Gordon won the very first 2 races here at the Kansas Speedway. Ryan Newman won in 2003, and then over the last 5 years, you see who the winners have been. Chase started in 2004. 3 times a non-Chase driver has won this race.
And a lot of that, I think, has to do with strategy. You look back at Tony Stewart when he won, and even Greg Biffle, that was the rain-shortened race, and we were fighting rain and darkness a couple of years ago.
Well, as Larry noted, Kyle Busch has run more laps than anybody else, 24 now in the garage where Bob Dillner is stationed.
And you can see him inside that garage area, Steve, looking over the front end of this race car, trying to see what's going on with that front end. He's very happy, actually. The car is a little bit tight, so they were trying to dial in on that a little bit and really never got it freed up to Kyle's liking. And Kyle does like a free car coming off the corner, and he was saying it was just kind of tight from center on off. But right now what they're going to do, him and Steve Addington are talking about going to qualifying setup right now. So he, though, Kyle that is, was very concerned with what the 11 was doing, and I heard you guys talk about that. He wanted Steve Addington to actually stay on top of the hauler and watch the 11 car around the racetrack. Now, I don't know exactly how they are working together, but it was interesting to hear you guys bring that up, and then Kyle note, hey, Steve, stay on top of the hauler, watch that 11 car, tell me what times he's running, and tell me how he looks around that racetrack. Pretty interesting.
And a lot of times, that's the one benchmark you've got is how your teammates are doing. Especially, the good thing about teammates is you know kind of what agenda they're on. You know how many laps are on their tires. You know if they've changed tires, and then obviously you know what adjustments they've made. So you can watch everybody, and you've got the scoring monitor, but you've got a lot more information when you're watching your teammates.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. for Hendrick Motorsports, 7th overall in this practice. Dale Earnhardt Jr. completed, or is working his 5th lap.
And probably on our practice shows here since we went off there with NASCAR on Fox back in, late May, early June, we've probably talked the least amount about this 88 car than we've ever since we've been doing the broadcast. But I'll be honest, there's just nothing there to talk about. I don't know how else to put it. You look back at last week at Dover, qualified 24th, finished 20th. I'm sure everybody in that organization, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Lance McGrew, Rick Hendrick, is going, what have we got to do to get this car competitive? It's just not there right now.
He had a great run going at New Hampshire, but David Rudiman got up into him, and Jr. wrecked out, so that spoiled a good run. But you're right, they're looking for something, and it could be a small thing, but they're searching.
Yeah, the two best runs he's had of late was Indianapolis and Loudon. Blew up at Indy, got crashed at Loudon. So it's like it just isn't meant to be this year.
watching his teammate at Hendrick Motorsports, Mark Martin, and we go to Wendy.
Mark Martin's out there for the third time this practice session and only putting his fourth lap on that practice chart. That's something I love about Mark Martin. He takes one lap, maybe two, will bring it in and give a ton of feedback to his crew chief, Alan Gustafson. Now, before this last run, he came in and he said then pretty neutral is how the car feels to him. He says he can handle it. The balance isn't too far off, unlike last week when they hit the practice chart. They had a lot of trouble at the beginning of a Friday practice last week. This week's a different story. So things are looking good for Mark Martin. He said he can work around that bounce that he's feeling in turn 3. Feels pretty good to him. Now he keeps comparing it to Chicago. In Chicago, his car tended to suck around that corner, but now he feels like the race car is just going straight. So that's what they're working on right now. And of course, Alan's making those very minor adjustments for Mark Martin this morning. Bob?
Well, take a look at this, Wendy. Clint Boyer goes from 13th quick all the way up to 2nd quick. All they did was change from race runs to a mock qualifying run. Clint Boyer loved his car actually in the race runs, was a little bit free. They decided to switch things over. Right now he's reporting that the car is pretty darn good, and you can tell that by the time, guys. Clint Boyer loves this racetrack. He's a Kansas boy and is really hoping to finally get a win here in the Cup Series.
And there's no question, Bob. I talked to Clint yesterday, and of course we know how close he came a couple of years ago, finished 2nd to Greg Biffle. Certainly drivers want to win at Indianapolis, they want to win at Daytona, but when you talk to Clint Boyer and you talk about victory lane and winning at Kansas, you see a twinkle in his eye.
Well, Carl Edwards said the same thing. Winning at Kansas, even though he's from Missouri, he said winning here would mean more to me than winning anywhere else. It's their home track.
Kansas is the same thing Indy was to Tony Stewart.
Exactly.
I mean, it just kind of holds that kind of a feeling in your heart. It'd be no different. Casey Kane, if it was a racetrack out in his part of the country where he grew up in Washington, he'd love to win out there. And speaking of Casey Kane, right now, they're struggling with this race car. He's 37th quickest in this practice. And interestingly enough, both of the Dodges that are in the chase, Kurt Busch and Casey Kane's Dodge, are at the bottom of the chart, with Kurt being 33rd and Casey being 37th. So I'm just wondering if the combination of engine and car right now not really working real well for either one of these guys.
Well, we know for a fact that Kenny Francis, Casey Kane, they've been notorious of late for staying in race trim up until almost the last run of the practice session. And I get a feeling he's run 10 laps. Kurt Busch has run 16 laps. Now, we do know that because of the issues that the 9 car had at Loudon with the new Dodge engine, that like last week, this week, they're back to the old engine package. And I thought Hermie Sadler in the NASCAR Live show before we came on the air did a good job of documenting the off-track trials and tribulations. And one thing I didn't hear him mention is news broke just this week that George Gillette is possibly selling controlling interest in that race team to a Saudi prince and his sports management group. And I think this is a group that he's also been dealing with or talking about his Canadian hockey team. So a lot of off-track distractions with this 9 team.
A lot of turmoil. Well, Sunday, NASCAR race day thunders into Kansas for the 3rd race in the championship chase. They'll chat live with Jimmy Johnson as he sets his sights on teammate Mark Martin. And Joey Logano talks about his thrill ride in Dover. NASCAR race day built by the Home Depot in Kansas, Sunday at 11. Speed's coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice from Kansas is brought to you by Camping World's Destination Recreation Sweepstakes. Log on to campingworld.com/racing to enter weekly giveaways. This week, win one of 5 $500 shopping sprees. 51 minutes in the books of a 90-minute practice as we take a look at Carl Edwards in the 99 car. He's jumped up into the 11th position.
You know, Wendy a while ago was talking about the fact of drivers' teams kind of relating back to Chicagoland when we were there back in mid-late July. And I do know, talking to some drivers and some crew chiefs, they say, you know, it is kind of relative, but it just seems like that this track A has less grip than Chicagoland Speedway, and that the corners are a little sharper, a little tighter, especially on the exit of the corner, that it's a little more of a challenge to get off the corners here. And I think a lot has to do at Chicagoland Speedway off of 2. Remember, the back straightaway actually has some turning to it. It's not quite as sharp on the exit of turn 2 as it did here at Kansas.
No, this is definitely not a repeat of Chicago. I mean, it's like we always talk about Charlotte and Atlanta. They both are very similar in a lot of different ways, but they definitely are different. Just like Texas, I mean, there may be a lot of similarities to these two places, but they are definitely different sisters.
I want to mention, too, as we watch Tony Stewart, since we first started coming here, isn't this a beautiful area, the facility?
Oh.
I mean, there's a Great Wolf Lodge right behind here. They call this development Village West, and it is just gorgeous. Restaurants and shopping. It's a great vacation destination.
We first came here in 2001, there were 2 interstates and a racetrack. And now it's a city in its own, and I heard yesterday, as much as this has been going back and forth, that the plan is in place and all approvals are in place for the most part to build the hotel and the casino that's going to be just outside of Turn 2 here at Kansas.
Michael Waltrip said Monday night he was going to go to the Great Wolf Lodge and go down the water slide.
I can see that.
I'd like to see pictures of that right there myself.
We're hearing that it's already happened. I would say even the water slide indoors is a little cool today.
Woo! And Tony must be a little bit happier with that race car right now since they got it in a qualifying mode right there.
That's the
quickest.
That's the outdoor water slide.
I would say that's closed for the season.
Yes, Great Wolf Lodge is all indoors of the Great Wolf Lodge.
Yeah, and during the winter months they run bobsleds down through that part.
I believe it.
Our cameraman is not nervous. That's the wind.
That's the wind.
That's the wind.
Gusting to 30
You can
miles
see the
an hour.
flags.
Hold on, Nelson. We'll send you an anchor or something, buddy. Tie you down.
Our buddy Max Pappas, he's got some work to do. He's one of the go or go home cars, and right now he is 46th of the 46 cars that's here. He's got to get it on time. It is a birthday for Max Pappas this weekend. He'll turn 40 years old tomorrow. Max, he's taken a couple of weeks off, but I was told this morning by his crew chief, Booty Barker, they plan on running the remaining races with the exception of Martinsville in about 2 or 3 weeks.
Now, why is he going to skip Martinsville?
Don't know. That's right up there in Booty's hometown. Close to it.
I figured that'd be right down Max's alley right there. It's right little half-mile racetrack.
I met Booty's mom up at Martinsville when y'all were doing NASCAR Performance a couple years ago.
She normally comes hangs out with us there. There's David Gilliland. We talked about him in the second Robbie Gordon car. Actually, right now, David's in pretty good shape. The slowest of our go-or-go homers, we've got 46 cars here. 3 will go home, is Mike Bliss in the 09 car. Kevin Hamlin, that's normally John Andretti's spotters in the 37 car, and Michael McDowell in the 36 car.
Mad Max.
And now Max Pappas has jumped up to 20th quickest, so I believe they've decided to lay a little qualifying.
I can say Booty done lit a fire under Max.
Hey, if you missed NASCAR Live, that was right before this practice. We showed Joey Logano in a press conference in the media center here at Kansas, and somebody said, hey, did that big wreck at Dover, did that shake you up any? And he said, no, it's just the opposite. I know now what those cars can withstand, and as we take another look at it, he really put that car to the test.
You know, I've been going to Dover a long time, guys, and I've seen a lot of wild wrecks there, but that's going to rank right up there with the top as far as that little accident right there with the 20 car. It was pretty wild.
You can see this was right after a restart, about 2 or 3 laps after a restart. He goes to the inside of Bobby Labonte in the 96. He comes down, shoots him up the racetrack, and just a couple of hits from that 43 car gets him tumbling down the racetrack. And I've said all week, and I'm not too proud to say it again, that as much as a lot of us, be it competitors, owners, drivers, broadcasters, we've maybe not said all positive things about the new car, that right there gives us the confirmation that NASCAR, they've done the right thing with this race car. Do we still need to help it a little bit from a competition side? Maybe so.
Maybe.
But I think mission accomplished when you see wrecks like that, or you see wrecks like Jeff Gordon and Sam Hornish had at Watkins Glen back last month.
You know, we watched that wreck as we watch currently Denny Hamlin. Karen Mesa from NASCAR confirmed that the fuel cell on the 20 car this week was the same one they had in that car last week. And I said, it might be all that's left.
And you know what? We were talking yesterday, that car, had it not been for some roll cage structure damage, that car could have almost been fixed and put back out on the racetrack.
Amazing.
Well, the thing is, you talk about that, the other 3 cars that were involved in that wreck, they all repaired and went back out on the racetrack. And we were taking a look at Denny Hamlin just a minute ago. He just came back on the pit road. He moved up to 4th quickest. Now it's Jeff Gordon's turn to see what kind of lap he can lay down. Jeff has only run 3 laps in this practice, so let's see what he can do this time.
Jeff Gordon was 16th. Let's see if he picks up. Yes, sir. 6th overall. So our top 7 cars, 6 of them are Chevrolets. Denny Hamlin, the only Toyota interloper.
Yeah, we've got 3 of the Hendrick cars now in the top 6, and right now Dale Earnhardt Jr. looking pretty good back in 12th.
You know, I don't know if we noted this or not, but look who's second quickest right now. Hometown favorite right there, Clint Boyer.
7 chasers among the 11 fastest as Steve Letarte looks on with you. About 30 minutes remaining in this 90-minute Cup practice. Bob Dillner standing by with the Missouri native, Carl Edwards.
Carl Edwards is 18th quick right now. You're in qualifying trim. How is it out there, and what are you trying?
Well, we're working hard on qualifying trim. Our athletic team is, you know, we've never really focused too much on qualifying, but we're realizing that that could be hurting us a little bit. So the biggest thing, I think, is the wind. You know, the car feels a lot different in 1 and 2 than it does in 3 and 4. You kind of come around 4, and it feels like you hit the headwind, and the thing grips a bunch. I think it's the wind. I don't know if it's the wind or the track, but definitely kind of interesting out there right now.
Carl Edwards, another one of those guys that would really like a win here, guys, and that wind is affecting everybody, no matter whether you're in qualifying trim or race runs.
We're seeing more and more of them, I think, click over to qualifying trim. In fact, David Stremme right here in the 12 car, 6th quickest. Ran a 31.47, and he ran a lot of laps, 24 laps. Looks like now Roy McCauley and that group, they've got this car in qualifying trim. He is the fastest Dodge.
Our slowest chase driver is Casey Kane. He's just 40th overall.
Hey guys, you know, we might want to go back, because a lot of people may be tuning in, and we keep hearing us talk about qualifying setup versus race setup. And Larry, I think people need to understand that there is difference. You know, the weight of the car, we move the ballast around. Usually you run a little bit more nose weight for qualifying, because during race times, you know, you're going to burn fuel off and it's going to transfer weight. So you change the weight percentage as far as the car is concerned. You obviously add more tape. So for those reasons, when you start trying to add tape, the car usually gets more compression on the front end. So you got to adjust the packers, get the car up off the racetrack. A lot of little things, including maybe the rear springs or the rear track bar angle. We may adjust it up or down to kind of free the car up a little bit. So there's a lot that goes on when we talk about a qualifying setup. You just want the car to get maximum grip, maximum speed for really 1 lap, Steve. That's what you're looking for. So the driver can go out there and just put his foot down and get all he can out of it, use the tires up, and bring it right back to pit road. When you're running the race setup, you're thinking about 30 or 40 laps. You want the car to be consistent and comfortable for that period of time.
Yeah, the old rule of thumb, at least with the old car, this car seems to come across a little different. See, Richard Childers, the owner of this 31 car of Jeff Burton, but the old rule of thumb was with the old car is here for qualifying, you needed to tighten the car up. It was going to get loose when you threw that tape on the nose. And then you had to really work to free the car up for race trim, for long runs when you burn the fuel off and had the front end open.
And Jeff Burton right now, 20th. Let's see, Jeff Burton, yeah, 24th, and we saw the Buckeye Bullet Dave Blaney moments ago. Blaney 10th quick right now in that number 66 Toyota. Let's go to Wendy.
And the 42 cars in the garage area, they are making some good changes to it. It's back on the scales. Juan Pablo Montoya has been out of his car, walking around, checking out the tires, talking to the crew guys. Team morale seems pretty good, but right now Juan Pablo Montoya is not happy with the race trim of his race car. He says it's too loose. When he turns it in, it feels a little bit racy, but then it will snap out on him. So he says it's worse in race trim than it was in qualifying trim. They continue to make some adjustments. Brian Patty off the hauler and around the race car. They hopefully will get these changes made, and Juan will get back out there and see if he can get a little bit more speed under these race conditions in that race trim.
Just searching, you're not searching for a lot these days. You're searching for, in some case, hundredths, in some case, thousandths of a second. It'll be that tight, I'm sure, today when we have qualifying.
Matt Kenseth headed down onto the apron. Kenseth is 14th overall in his DeWalt Tools 4.
He's back.
Well, and I talked to Drew Blickensderfer, his crew chief, the other night. Of course, a great run at Dover, qualified 22nd, finished 3rd. That was their first top 5 finish since finishing 4th at Dover in the spring. But even Drew said, Larry, Dover is Matt Kenseth type of racetrack. It doesn't relate to a lot of other tracks. Our measuring stick will be these next two tracks, Kansas, where he runs well, and of course Auto Club Speedway, a track that he won at earlier in the spring. If we come out of there with good runs, then we'll feel like, hey, we're making some ground with this 17 car.
And we take a look at Jamie McMurray in the 26 car, who winds up being 12th quickest. You know, some talk to some guys over at Roush Fenway this week that they've done some changes over there with their simulations and their approach to these mile-and-a-half racetracks, trying to get this program, as far as the entire group at Roush Fenway, more competitive in the remaining 8 races this year. So, you know, I think we're starting maybe to see some of that. McMurray got a good qualifying effort out of him. Good to see Carl Edwards. He's on the right side of the board for a change. So, along with Matt Kenseth, so maybe what they're attempting to do is starting to pay off a little bit this week.
Saw Brett Keselowski in the 25 car. He is 25th overall.
You know, Steve, we were talking about Paul Menard. He just made another practice qualifying run in that 98 car, and he jumped up the 4th quickest, by far the fastest 4.
John Andretti is the slowest of all 46 here at the Kansas Speedway.
I think John's working on race setup right now more than anything else. He knows he's locked into this race, and he's just trying to get that number 34 car comfortable for him for the start of the race on Sunday.
And Jeff, he's run 26, now working on 27 laps of practice. So by comparison, Jimmy Johnson, who's the quickest, has run just 7.
And you know what Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson are looking for? Another sweep like they had here a year ago at Kansas. The pole and the win.
We'll be right back to Kansas. Tomorrow, the World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series is back on speed. It's the greatest show on dirt. Don't miss the National Open from Williams Grove tomorrow at 8 Eastern and only on Speed.
You know, Steve, speaking of outlaws, our favorite outlaw, Darrell Waltrip, he just texted me on my Sprint phone, and as he's been listening, we were talking about qualifying. One of the things we didn't discuss, Larry, you and I both know this is very important, is the air pressure between qualifying as well as the race. In the race, you usually let the air pressure down because you know it's going to build up. Qualifying, sometimes you will air the tires up, maybe make the car a little bit, you know, depending on how the tire grips or whatever. You may even add more air to the tire to make that grip a little more effective, at least on a one-lap run. So thanks, DW. Glad you're watching. But, you know, make sure we keep us honest, I guess, the rest of the broadcast. If we miss something, just text me and we'll get it on the air.
Denny Hamlin just jumped up into the top 5. Jimmy Johnson is still quickest, and with that we go to Wendy.
Okay, well, nobody's texting me, but I did hear from Pat Tryson and the fact that they aren't really happy with this race car. Kurt Busch climbing out after this run. He said this changes they just made, which was a rear spring change, didn't turn much better. He's a little bit freer in spots. If you notice, he's 28th on the practice chart. Not quite the speed that Kurt Busch and Pat Tryson want out of the race car. But if you do look at the top 10 of the practice chart, their teammate, David Stremme, was 8th just a moment ago. And at what point, Larry or Jeff, a question for you guys, what point do you go over to your teammate and grab their setup, throw it in the 2 car to try it out? Because I know Pat Tryson is trying to throw everything at this race car right now.
Right now, Wendy, I think a lot of it has to do with the time that we have remaining. We've only got about 20 minutes left in this practice, so I don't know how far off they are from their setups. But yeah, if it's close, yeah, you want to be able to do that, and that will be one of the things that they can. That's a great thing about having teammates. And Bob, you know, being down in that garage area, teammates are invaluable during this period of time.
Definitely, and you know, there are some significant members of each crew. You take a look at Hendrick Motorsports, and Jeff Gordon is struggling just a little bit down here. Ken Howes has been over here talking to the engineers. He's a longtime member of Hendrick Motorsports. He's been talking to Steve Letarte because Jeff Gordon is neither pushy, neither loose. He's actually in between, but what this car is having trouble on as this track here in Kansas ages a little bit, it's getting some bumps in the corners. And right now, the 24 is not interacting with those bumps the way that Jeff Gordon would like. So they're going to change some settings on the front shocks here. They just put a different right rear spring in the car, but Jeff Gordon said the car just gets really unsettled when it hits those bumps, and he does not like that. Remember, they are in qualifying mode solely during this practice session, and you need to go all out. And it's really difficult when you hit those bumps and the car gets unsettled a little bit. Jeff Gordon wants to figure that out a little bit in this last couple minutes in practice.
Well, Bob, David Reagan, a different paint scheme on that UPS Ford, and right now silver is fast, as in fastest. David Reagan has turned the fastest lap. In fact, he is the only driver over 173 miles an hour. 31.20 seconds.
And this team, they just need something good to happen, whether it's a good qualifying run, a good race run. The 6 team, they just need something, I think, just to boost their what's going on with them that they've had to deal with this year.
Oh, yeah, right now they're looking for anything. If they could win the doggone race from the garage area to the gas pumps and beat somebody, it would be a moral victory for that group right now. Here's another guy that just jumped up as far as the practice charts, veteran Bill Elliott, driving for the Wood Brothers. They're in the 21 car. He's now 13th quickest.
Now, the last time we saw Bill was actually at Michigan. We saw the 21 team, they were at Atlanta, but remember, Bill had some injuries from a motocross wreck that he had on a dirt bike, and David Gilliland was in the car, so Bill's back in action here this weekend.
Michael Waldrop in the Napa Auto Parts Toyota. Michael just moved up on this timing and scoring monitor. 27th overall.
You know, we just saw David Reagan. I think I read here just yesterday where Michael Waltrip and David Reagan are going to be on an episode of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? That's going to be, I would not miss that one for the world.
No. They've already answered that question. By going out on that television program, you're not very smart. Offer yourself up for that. I remember Darrell and I did that, an episode kind of like that at the Hollywood Hotel one time, and it's tougher than what you think.
I'd say after that episode, those fifth graders will quit. They'll just quit and go home.
No, they'll think they deserve to get a degree because after they beat those guys so bad. I don't know how David's going to be, but I can imagine how Michael's going to be.
Kyle Busch. He'd run a lot of laps early in this practice. 28 is his total, but got to think he's making that qualifying run right now.
You know, I'm going to step out on a limb here on Kyle Busch and this 18 group. I'm starting to see a little bit of a pattern develop. It's almost like, I'm not saying all of his focus is on winning the Nationwide Series championship, but almost the pattern I'm seeing is when he has a frustrating day on Saturday, he has a frustrating day on Sunday. If you look at the 2 races before Dover, you know, especially like Loudon, where he had a great run, he didn't have to deal with that Nationwide Series car. And you know, he had a great run in the Nationwide car last week at Dover, top 5 finish, but he felt like it was the one that got away, and then he had a very frustrating day on Sunday.
Monday on This Week in NASCAR, Jimmy Spencer was very candid, very honest. He said that team, the 18 team, needs to make a crew chief change.
Jimmy's been saying that for a while.
What do you think? Does that fix the problem if you unplug Steve Addington and put somebody else in there?
I don't know if I agree with that one. That's the same team that won. What was I saying?
He got distracted. Who's Jimmy Spencer? Back at the Kansas Speedway, Tony Stewart just ran an identical lap to David Reagan, 31.201 seconds, 173.07 miles per hour. We have 41 drivers who have run a 31-second lap.
You better speak quick because it could change right here, and it will, to a 31.12 by Jimmy Johnson. Chad Canals, Jimmy Johnson said, enough of that. We're going back to the top of the chart. So looking right now, we talked about how tight it's going to be. We've got about 8 or 9 cars in the 3120s. But back to my thought on the 18 car. That's the same race team that's won 12 races in less than 2 seasons. The only team I think that maybe's won more races than I'd have to check. I don't know if anybody has. I don't know if the 48 cars even won more races. The 99 won 9 last year, none this year. I don't know that I would agree with a crew chief change on the 18 car.
But the thing is right now, there's something has to be done though, Larry, because 2 years in a row, they've won more races, you point out, than anybody else. But they fell short when they made the chase, and it didn't make the chase this year. If it's kind of like winning a bunch of football games, and they can't win the Super Bowl when it counts. And that's where they got to work on, whatever it is, to get in a position where they can make a run for the championship. I mean, they've got the talent. They know they can win, but you've got to have the consistency to go with it. Bob?
Well, in the time period that I came from the front side of the garage over here to see David Reagan, he went from first to third on the timing charts, but I know you got to be really pleased with that run. It looks like you got a good car here for qualifying.
Yeah, our UPS freight car is pretty good, and certainly, you know, the season we've had and not being in the chase allows us to kind of experiment some, you know, these last few races. So, you know, our UPS team, Jimmy Finning, we're pulling some old tricks out of the bag. This was a great track for our team last year. So, yeah, our Ford's pretty fast so far, and hopefully we can get a nice qualifying effort. And, you know, the real practice will be tomorrow, getting ready for the race.
And guys, I'm sure that his teammates that are in the chase will be running over to see what Jimmy Finning and David Reagan did to that race car.
And I know it's not happening this week, but I was also told, I think Jeff Hammond has talked about this recently, that more than likely one of the three cars outside of the chase from the Roush Fenway camp, more than likely before the end of 2009, will run and race that new Ford engine that they'll all be racing in 2010.
Tell you what, guys, Martin Truex Jr. has been fast this entire practice. He is 4th overall right now. And Larry, you talked about Elliott Sadler hosting some servicemen here. I believe also Earnhardt Ganassi Racing is as well.
I think you're exactly right. Yes, they've got several people from the military here. Here's Bobby Labonte in the 71 car. Now this will be his 3rd attempt at driving this 71 car, and I guess about the last 4 races of this year, he's going to run them all. But this is a brand new race car that was actually built by Earnhardt Ganassi, and Slugger Labby, the crew chief, said for the first time this year, they got on a pull-down rig with one of their cars on the 7-poster. So I know they're pretty excited about their efforts here with Bobby Labonte this weekend.
Hammond was throwing napkins and stuff at Slugger on the plane yesterday flying out here.
Why were you being mean to Slugger?
You're snoring loud, just like you do when you get on an airplane.
Oh, Wendy.
Well, no one's sleeping here in the 48 pit stall. Chad Knaus having a very serious conversation with Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy could not hear the lap time over the radio. They have been having radio communication trouble, but we do know that it was the fastest lap time for Jimmy Johnson. He just posted 31:12 up there, and what Chad Knaus did say to Jimmy Johnson was real good job. It was a solid lap. Now they came in, they're going to put, they just put the new set of sticker tires on it. They're going to make one more run. We have about 10 minutes left in this practice session, and although they are at the top of the chart, they do want to put these set of stickers, and they do want to get the radio communication fixed for Jimmy Johnson. That seems to be their biggest problem today. Not so bad, huh, Steve?
Nope. They've showed up ready to race just like last week.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Know what I said last week? Rut road.
Yes, you did.
The boys are back in town.
Brad Keselowski in the 25 car this weekend. Remember, he won at Talladega in the 09. Right now, just 35th overall for Keselowski. He's run 12 laps.
I had a chance to talk to Tony Ure Jr., crew chief on this 25 car, and I asked Tony, I said, how do you feel about Brad leaving the Hendrick organization? He said, man, it's probably one of the saddest days that I can think of. He said, this guy here's got a lot of talent. And he said he liked to refer to it that Brad's got one of those buttons. I said, what do you mean one of those buttons? And I think Larry will understand this. One of those kind of driver buttons you can put your finger on, and all of a sudden he's got a little extra kick. He can find a way to go a little bit faster, just like he just did on that qualifying attempt. He's now moved up to 9th quickest in that number 25 car. So they're going to be missing him whenever he leads this number 25 car.
He just pushed the button.
He did.
Well, and that's good because he's a go-or-go-home car. He becomes the fastest go-or-go-homer. And I know at the sister track back in July, Chicagoland Speedway, Brad told me the one thing he struggles with this car is trying to figure out how to run a fast qualifying lap, especially going back and forth between the Nationwide Series car and the Sprint Cup Series car.
And
Well,
that's something that Tony said.
What do you know? Look who's quickest all of a sudden. The Rocket Man, Ryan
Newman.
Ooh.
31:08.
By the way, just want to make sure we don't leave any questions unanswered. Of course, Brad Keselowski is going to be driving that 12 car at Penske next year. Don't know yet what David Stremme will do for 2010.
And they actually did a tire test just recently for Goodyear down at Daytona. Brad Keselowski was actually in the 12 car for that test. And as you say, we're watching Reed Sorensen. We don't want to leave anything unanswered. He just handed me a sticky note. I was talking about wins by the 18 car. I knew it was 12, and that's actually one more win than the 48 car since the beginning of 2008. They have 11 Jimmy Johnson in that group.
See that 43 car wiggling up off that corner right there?
Larry,
a little loose.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He had a big old wiggle coming off turn 4, I think it was.
Coming off of turn 4. You see him inside of his hands, just working that car up off the corner.
Reed Sorensen in the 43 car's teammate, A.J. Allmendinger in the top 10. Sorensen 18th overall in the 43 car right now. Juan Pablo Montoya right now 3rd quickest to Ryan Newman and Jimmy Johnson. Final minutes of this 90-minute NASCAR Sprint Cup Series practice, and Jeff Hammond, we see drivers lined up getting ready to make a qualifying run.
Yeah, this is not Talladega, but you can see the importance of trying to have some clear racetracks so you get your speed build up. You see Jimmy Johnson, who is right now 2nd quickest. He's just rolling off in the pit road. He's following Tony Stewart with a big long line of cars. Everybody trying to make one more lap with about 4 minutes to go in this practice.
And I think this is such a fast racetrack, and probably qualifying a real line sensitive, hit your mark racetrack. If nothing else, you just don't want a distraction out there in front of you by the fact of another car being there.
Ryan Vickers in the Red Bull Toyota. Let's see, the 83 is 22nd overall. Let's see if he picks up.
His teammate Scott Speed is the 2nd quickest go-homer. He is 11th quickest in that 82 car.
Little bobble right there by the 48, right in the middle of the corner there, Larry.
Right now he's 2nd quickest behind Ryan Newman. This is probably going to be their last run of this practice session. We only have about 2.5 minutes left to go in this practice session.
And it was almost like the car hit one of those transition points right in the middle, right there across some of that tar or whatever, and the car just lost the front end a little bit, and the car just stepped out on him, but he's going to remain 2nd quickest.
You know what's amazing? Jimmy Johnson has only been on the circuit since 2002. Let's take a look at this, Jeff. This is, I think, what you were seeing and talking about. And again, I don't think we can stress that it doesn't look that bad, but you're well over 180 miles an hour out there. But what I was going to say, Jimmy has only been full-time in the Sprint Cup Series since 2002. He just got his 44th career win. Not to dilute Bill Elliott's efforts, but Bill has been in Sprint Cup since the mid-70s, and with that win last week at Dover, Jimmy tied Bill Elliott for all-time wins with 44.
And I think the stat that blows me away for Jimmy Johnson as we watch Kurt Busch, 6 consecutive seasons for Jimmy Johnson with at least 4 wins. Let's go to Bob Dillner.
Ryan Newman on top of the board here in this practice session, but I think the interesting thing was, in listening to your radio, you think you have more in it.
What?
You think you can get even more out?
A little bit. I wasn't a perfect lap, but it was a good lap with the U.S. Army Chevrolet, and Tony Gibson, the guy's done a really good job. It's the most confidence I've had in qualifying trim since probably back to Charlotte. So just have to keep it up for one more effort.
All right, Ryan Newman fastest. He said the car's just a little bit tight, but how about that? He's got more in him.
And that's the one pole that he has in 2009 for the Coca-Cola 600 back at Lowe's Motor Speedway in May.
And Casey Kane, we said he's really been searching for speed, just 45th overall right now, and you see he's headed to the apron and then, of course, to the garage as this practice is all but over.
I'm going to add to these Jimmy Johnson stats. Wins since 2002. Jeff Gordon has 24. Tony Stewart has 24. Jimmy Johnson has 44 wins since 2002.
And let's take it one step further, guys. I mean, you maybe heard this story and stat. When you think about who's won more championships and the total number of championships, Earnhardt and Petty
7.
and Gordon with 7, and not like they do. The key thing is average of finishing the points is where they stack up. Jimmy Johnson is like 2.3 compared to Earnhardt and Petty and the rest of those guys, a lot less. I mean, he has always been, since they started getting involved in the chase, he's always been a consistent finisher. With all 4 of those championships, hadn't hurt him either, but otherwise he has been a contender every year when it comes to the points also. There's the red and black.
Practice is over. A.J. Allmendinger, you just saw the 44 car, 8th overall. Wendy?
Guys, moments ago you showed that video of the 48 of Jimmy Johnson getting that little bobble in it. Maybe the racetrack, but I know for sure we had a huge gust of wind come through right about the time I was on the radio talking to our producers, telling how much the wind had picked up at that exact moment when Jimmy had that slight bobble. You could tell the flags how full they're blown up here. It is a windy day, up to 40 miles an hour here at the Kansas Speedway, but somebody's got a speed flag. They're smart, but they're going to keep up with the wind today. That, I think, has been the biggest problem in this practice session.
Sound like a windy report from Wendy.
That would be the 117th Wendy joke she's heard today. Also, Also, the 48 car looked like it was in that seam that Jeff Hammond talked about. It's time for our sprint now moment. And speaking of a rough ride, look at Reed Sorensen in that 43 car. Did a great job keeping it out of the wall.
I think a great save right there goes to that young man right there, because that car really did try to step out on him, and he had his hands full.
Ryan Newman, the quickest in this practice. They qualify today about 4:30 Eastern, 3:40 local. You see Mike Ford and Denny Hamlin as they start their debrief prior to qualifying. Let's take a look at the top 10 times here in practice.
We've only got 4 of our chase guys there. The top 3, and then Tony Stewart back in the 6th spot.
Hey, but what did you say about this racetrack right at the very beginning? We have had guys that were non-chasers wind up winning this race, and we've had a lot of surprise winners and pole sitters because, again, we only come here to Kansas once a year.
43 drivers in the 31-second bracket. Ryan Newman the quickest. Stay with us here on Speed after the break. The birthday boy, John Roberts, has NASCAR Live.
How old is he?